Okay, so for all of the speakers and Joanna, we will start in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, esteemed speakers, Y20 delegates, and members of the audience. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening where you are. My name is Joanna Octavia, doctoral researcher at the Warwick Institute for Employment Research and the Indonesian delegate to the 2018 Y20 Summit in Argentina. It is an honor for me to be your moderator today in the second talk show of the Y20 Pre-Summit on Youth Employment, focusing on the topic of youth social entrepreneurship. Combining both entrepreneurial activity and the objective of addressing social problems, social entrepreneurship has become an attractive employment option for many young people around the world and also an engine for job creation, including for underserved communities. Many young people have expressed their desire to hold a job that can give them personal fulfillment or enable them to make a difference in society. And today, many of them are also holding businesses to a higher standard. In a survey conducted by Y20 Indonesia on 5,700 young people across the G20, we found that more than half of them think that businesses have a responsibility to contribute to their community. Furthermore, a 2020 survey also indicated that 54% of young people in G20 countries are interested in starting their own business. But the question remains whether current entrepreneurship ecosystems are responsive to the needs, characteristics, constraints, and ambitions of young people. Today, we are honored to have 6 excellent speakers to give engaging lectures and insights related to this topic. The talk show will be divided into 2 sessions. In the first session, which will last for about half an hour, we will be welcoming youth employment experts from the International Labor Organization, as well as the United Nations Development Program. They will share with us their view on the youth social entrepreneurship ecosystem and policy framework. In the second session and the remaining 1 hour, we will be joined by young social entrepreneurs as well as practitioners who will share with us their experience working directly in the field and their views on policies and initiatives that will support young social entrepreneurs and strengthen the social enterprise sector as a whole. I will now introduce our 2 speakers for the first session. Susanna Puerto Gonzalez is the Senior Youth Employment Specialist at the International Labor Organization. Welcome, Susanna. Susanna leads the global initiative on decent jobs for youth, an inclusive multi-stakeholder partnership chaired by the ILO to scale up action and impact on youth employment within the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Her latest work through Decent Jobs for Youth has focused on understanding the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on young people and advising on policy solutions. With over 10 years of experience on the promotion of youth employment, Susanna has managed and contributed to multiple efforts boosting employability and job creation. And our second speaker for the first session is Din Long Pham, Youth Social Entrepreneurship and Innovation Coordinator of the Youth CoLab at the UNDP Bangkok Regional Hub. Welcome, Din Long. Din Long is a proud French-born Vietnamese supporting youth to achieve greater impact for the SDGs. He is a social gardener, community builder, facilitator, and happy podcast host with a passion for youth empowerment and engagement, social justice, and climate change. He is currently working with young social entrepreneurs and community builders across Asia Pacific through the Youth CoLab, an initiative co-led by UNDP and City Foundation. Now, without further ado, we will hear from Susanna about her work at the International Labour Organization. Susanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Joanna, and hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm just waiting for the slides to come in. I asked the organizers to please, thank you so much. So, I am super happy to be here. So as was said, I work for the ILO. I am based in Geneva, and one of my responsibilities is to lead the global initiative on decent jobs for youth, which is a multi-stakeholder alliance designed by the United Nations to boost employment opportunities for young people in support of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So we can go to the next slide. And before we can go to the next slide. And before we go deeper on entrepreneurship per se, let's set the scene a little bit and understand where we are today as regards to the Youth Employment Challenge. So undoubtedly, and I'm sure you know and have experienced it, COVID has stalled any progress of the past years, especially among young people. We estimate a fall in global youth employment by 8.7% in 2020 compared to a fall of 3.7% among adults. So you can already see some of the specific vulnerabilities of young people vis-a-vis adults. And it was actually young women who experienced greater employment losses. So when one thinks about those losses, then naturally one thinks, where did the employment losses go? And it turns out that most of them have translated into inactivity. So we have seen vast increases in the number of young people that are not in employment, education, and training, which is something very important to bear in mind when we are talking about social entrepreneurship as well. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And let's say, without describing much than this, the challenge of that young people are facing in integrating themselves into the labor market, I would love to show you how, in the next slide, how a policy package could look like to support youth employment. First, think of the destination. The destination is the labor market. That's where we want young people to be and succeed and flourish. Obviously, to achieve this and with the target of decent jobs, we need employment center macroeconomic policies and sectoral policies. And I'm sure we're going to talk much more today about the role of the green economy, digital care, creative. All of these elements offer an important niche for young people to access the labor market. The second element is the paths. And this may vary across countries in the groups of young people and the groups of young people we are serving. But it also and specifically emphasizes the importance of skilling young people. And here the support for young entrepreneurs and the promotion of small and medium enterprises is very important. And third, it's about inclusiveness. So within the G20, we have a very strong commitment to reduce the share of young people who are at risk of being permanently left behind. So when we talk about social entrepreneurship, then we have to make sure, and it is also a call to action, that we bring the rights and the voices and representation of young people, particularly those that are at risk. So in the next slide, and the organizers asked me to talk a little bit about what works and what are some successful experiences or elements that have triggered success in terms of supporting young people to transition into the labor market, be it in wage or self-employment. So first, it's important to note that there are interventions that are called active labor market programs. These are interventions to integrate young people in the labor market. And what we see from the evidence is that they effectively work to increase employment and earnings of young people, but they also increase the business performance when those interventions are targeted at the promotion of entrepreneurship. So it is, however, an investment that takes time. So investing in youth demands some planning and some patience. And this is important as your voices will reach the G20. There are nevertheless some promising practices, especially around youth entrepreneurship, across all the different types of interventions that one can do within to activate young people in the labor market. Entrepreneurship has shown certain success, and therefore it's important to bear in mind another aspect, which is the context at the country level. And Joanna, you started talking about what are those policies, that ecosystem that allows that growth. So on one hand, what we see is that the strong labor market institutions will go a very long way in promoting youth employment. And something that is perhaps no news to you, but it continues sort of emerging from the evidence, is that comprehensive interventions tend to work better. And when we talk about entrepreneurship, this means combining, for example, training with access to finance. But there may be other types of interventions where I also see social enterprises led by young people succeeding, and it is the case of employment services, for example, some very promising youth-led businesses that are cracking codes and tinkering how to support young people's transition into the labor market, supporting the interviews, CVs, and capacitating, giving information that many times is what it hinders access for young people to the market. And last but not least is about profiling. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, some of the methods for profiling include the integration of business plans. And through business plans is in a way is relatively easy for young people to self-target into certain interventions, or simply as a profiling tool for governments and others that are trying to understand what probability of success those businesses led by young people will have. So in the next slide, and I will, of course, these slides will be available to you, I focus much more on the evidence about entrepreneurship. And what we see is that, very much focusing on business training, small businesses that are receiving training. And when these programs happen that are promoting the skills within those businesses, what we see is that there is an increase of 5 to 10% in sales and profits on average in these businesses. And what is perhaps more interesting to you is the emerging evidence about some approaches that seem to be really boosting the impact of business training. So these are approaches that integrate gender elements. The second approach is what we call the Kaizen methods. It's a Japanese concept of Kaizen, or continuous improvement. There are also elements or approaches around the localization of this training and the role of mentoring. the use of heuristics, which is basically another word to talk about simplifying content so that it can be more easily integrated and understood by business owners, and also the use of psychology. And on the right-hand side, very quickly, you will see some promising approaches. There is not a lot of evidence about this, but I'm sure we'll hear more today from experiences that use the market, that use technology, and that find different mechanisms to improve the impact that training may have on businesses. And just my very last slide, just to summarize what I just said, it's really promoting social youth entrepreneurship is part of a greater package. And it's important that we see that ecosystem. So first, getting the macro policies right is very important if we want, first of all, these businesses to succeed. And if we want this sort of open approach towards pro-employment for young people. So at the same time, I'm building on the evidence I mentioned earlier. It is important to bring a comprehensive policy package that targets young people, is gender responsive, and may also include and link strategically to skills development strategies and policies. As I said before, bring your emphasis on strong institutions rather than ad hoc measures. Strong institutions is critical so that labor markets and all the other policies that accompany it are able to support that transition for young people to the labor market, and for those that are already established as entrepreneurs, will help them see their businesses grow. And again, a focus on the most disadvantaged, and the role of partnerships. So I mentioned before, we have within the UN system a partnership where UNDP is a very important partner and member that is called Decent Jobs for Youth. So this may open an opportunity for you to explore partnering with the UN system or other organizations, and then exploit the value of youth to youth or intergenerational equity, and very much working with very different types of organizations and partners. So I will leave it there, Joanna. Thank you so much, and thanks to all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Susanna. That was a wonderful presentation, because we learned a lot from that presentation, not only what Decent Jobs for Youth are doing, but we also learned that investing in youth is an investment that needs time to grow. I think Susanna also touches a bit on the country context. It's different from country to country, the approaches that we need to take. It also depends on the institutions and capability of each country. And I think it was emphasized as well that strong labor market institutions are very critical in promoting youth employment. Comprehensive interventions, not just one side being intervened, but we also need to tackle different things at once to promote youth employment. And I also like the fact that Susanna touched a bit about the role of partnerships, which I think it's something that we'll be revisiting later on in the Q&A. Thank you, Susanna. Din Long, so now the floor is yours. If you could perhaps explain a bit about your involvement in the Youth Collab and perhaps other initiatives that you've been a part of. We understand that Youth Collab is perhaps one of the largest, perhaps the largest youth social entrepreneurship movement in Asia and the Pacific, and we would love to hear more about your work. The floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Joanna, and hello, everyone. I can see people from all around the world, so it's really, really cool. I see people in the US, so good morning. I guess it's very early there. Yeah, I'm Din Long. It's a Vietnamese name, but I was born and raised in Paris in France, and right now I'm living in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I've just been to Indonesia twice in my life, twice in Bali, on my way to Timor-Leste, so I didn't really have time to visit Indonesia, but it's definitely on my bucket list. Yeah, I think before I start introducing about Youth Collab, I have a small question I'd love to ask everyone in the room, maybe just for me to get a better understanding, but I love asking this question. It's, okay, think about where you come from, and I'd love for you to share maybe the name of one social enterprise that you think most people know in your country. Like you go in the street, you just pick a random person and you say the name of the social enterprise to them, and you're pretty sure that they will know about it. So yeah, would love if you can share the name of that social enterprise on the chat, maybe the country. And if you don't think there is any who read this level yet, you can also share that. But yeah, about Youth Collab, so it's a project which has been started by UNDP in Asia and the Pacific, and collaboration with City Foundation back in early 2017. And I think Susanna made my work easier because she introduced the problem that we are also working on, right? The huge problem of youth unemployment. And it's something that UNDP tried to address through the Youth Collab, which is basically a youth social entrepreneurship and innovation and leadership project, which aims to basically support, empower the 660 million youth in the region to find innovative solutions for the SDGs. And we also work a lot with Decent Job for Youth, so it's a pleasure to meet you, Susanna. And yeah, I think so. That's the vision, right? It's to work with the youth, empower them to address the SDGs through social entrepreneurship. Recently, we also started a few activities where it's not focused purely on entrepreneurship, but I can speak more about it later. But since we are focused on entrepreneurship here, I can share a bit. So how do we put this vision into practice? I think for us, so the ultimate goal is to mainstream the concept of social entrepreneurship in each country in Asia and the Pacific. It's really that you go in the street, you ask people, do you know what is social entrepreneurship? And everyone says yes. Maybe for now, I just think I froze a bit, but I think I'm back. Yeah, let me know if you miss anything. But yeah, our goal is to mainstream the concept of social entrepreneurship. And how we try to do that is by working directly with the young social entrepreneurs and trying to support them at every phase of the entrepreneurship journey, from the problem definition phase to the ideation phase to the prototyping, access to market, growth, scale, investment stage, etc., etc. So trying to really support from day one to day infinity. What we say is once a young founder or social enterprise is part of the Youth Collab programs, they are always with us. And the approach that we try to do is through two things. The first one is, if you remember this entrepreneurship, so journey that I just mentioned, I think with the position of UNDP, which is quite neutral in an ecosystem, because we work with government, with private sectors, with incubators, co-working spaces, non-profits. We try to have this work with this network of partners so that we bring and leverage the expertise of all of them at the different phases of the journey of the entrepreneur. Because UNDP cannot do everything, and we acknowledge that, we know that. So trying to bring as much partners as possible to support the youth through their journey. And we try, having said that, we try to do that at 3 levels. So the first one is working directly with the young people. So it can be trainings, it can be innovation challenges, it can be national summits to bring everyone together. It can be training around SDGs so that they know which SDGs they care about and want to address. So that's what we call in the UNDP jargon, but the downstream side. So working directly with the young social entrepreneurs, or what we call the young aspiring social entrepreneurs who might not be entrepreneurs yet, but someday in the future. So this is first level, the downstream. Another UNDP jargon is the midstream. So it's where it's a level 2, working with, as I mentioned, all the different partners who all have their expertise, and working with them so that they can support the young entrepreneurs, whether it's through financial or non-financial support. And then the third level is working what we say the upstream, so or more on the policy making side, where we have trying to work with the governments to have a better regulatory framework for young social entrepreneurs, trying to publish some research work as well to better understand how is the state of an entrepreneurship ecosystem in this or this country, how to best support women-led social entrepreneurs, how COVID-19 impacted young social entrepreneurs. And it's with this one that we partnered with Decent Job for Youth, for example. And right now we have a current research on how is climate change affecting the young social entrepreneurs. And so that's a bit what Youth Collab is trying to do. We are working, so we are based in Bangkok, but it's UNDP Asia Pacific. So we are covering around 30 countries in the region. And maybe to highlight again a point from Susanna, definitely the localization is very, very important. Different countries will have a different level of maturity of the social entrepreneurship ecosystem, different priorities, maybe in terms of SDGs that, directly addressing. So we really work with the country offices and with the local partners to really, localize each of the programs. And how it works is we'll have different call for application in each of these countries. And that will be the entry point for the young founders to be in touch with Youth Collab program, whether it's nationally or regionally. And yeah, I'm looking at the answer on the chat. I see Kitabisa from Turkey, from UAE. Okay, Patagonia and Lush, I do know them as well. So I think it's very, very interesting. And yeah, I can speak much more, but I'm sure Joanna has many questions for Susanna and me. So yeah, I'll stop here. That was Youth Collab, but yeah, happy to answer any question.
Thank you, Din Long. That's amazing. I think we learned a lot about what Youth Collab is doing across Asia Pacific. You mentioned that the scope is actually all the 660 million youth in the region, and it's been working with so many young social entrepreneurs across Asia Pacific as well. You mentioned that you work directly with young people as well as organizations on the ground, local partners, but you also work with government on a higher level to push for a better regulatory framework in terms of a better youth social entrepreneurship ecosystem, publishing topical research, and also you mentioned that countries are on different levels of maturity and priorities. For example, on the SDGs, I think that's a bit similar to what Susanna has mentioned as well, with the different contexts for each country. Yeah, so that's really great. So thank you so much for your presentation. Now I would like to invite the delegates in the Zoom to start asking Susanna and Din Long some of our burning questions. For the Y20 delegates in the Zoom meeting room, if you have a question for both or one of the speakers, please raise your hand. I will call on you so that you can ask your question directly to them. Please also state your name, your country, the speaker that you are directing your question to, as well as your question. While we wait for the delegates, perhaps I can start with a question for both Susanna and Din Long. So both of you mentioned that you work with multiple stakeholders in many countries. Yeah, that's including governments, civil society, as well as the private sector. So across these countries and regions that you have worked with, who is the key stakeholder in building a youth social entrepreneurship ecosystem? Is it always the same actor from country to country, or do they differ? Perhaps Susanna would like to answer first, and then Din Long.
Thank you. So I'm afraid Din Long will be more attuned to that question, since there is a lot of practical work in his portfolio. But from my end, and this is the case not only for an entrepreneurship policy or initiative, but it's also just in general, when we talk about employment or youth employment, the key partners that often bring sustainability to those decisions are the governments, the employers, the workers, and in this particular case, young people as well. So that sort of group of four, it's very critical, so that we bring the voices of the employers and understand their needs. We bring the voices of the workers and secure any concerns about labor rights or any concerns about the ability of workers to bring their voices. And obviously, as we work for youth, then we also have to work with youth. So their visions, their agency has to be part of that equation.
Thank you, Susanna. How about Long? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a great question. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with Susanna, and maybe just to add as well, I think maybe one framework that we used, so Youth Collab just published in partnership with Startup Bangladesh. So it's like startup support organization and also VC, venture capital, like a venture builder and like investor, which is backed by the, I think, ICT ministry in Bangladesh. So we published a joint research on basically what is a state, what is like a snapshot of the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Bangladesh. And the framework that was used, and let me share maybe the different categories that makes an ecosystem. I think it's interesting to visualize what are the key players, key stakeholders, maybe key activities in an entrepreneurship ecosystem. So that it's in 6 points. The first one is definitely what is a policy and regulatory framework. So how are the policies that, how developed are the policies supporting youth social entrepreneurship? Is it easy to start, incorporate a business? Is it easy to close a business, etc., etc.? The second important point is about the human capital and entrepreneurship culture. So is there a culture where people, know and want to start a business, want to start a social business? Is there a culture where people are comfortable with taking risk? And then is there talent to start a business, to join a business? Is it something that we learn at school, at university? Is there training available? So that's the second point. The third point is about access to finance and other incentives. But is there prototyping grants, readily available for new entrepreneurs? Is there enough angel investors either to support, early stage startups who want to scale, or even just, social entrepreneurs who might not need to scale, but who are still looking for funding? Cannot, too big for microcredit, too small for banks. So is there, access to finance for the young founders? The fourth point is about the availability of support services, of business development support and the infrastructure. But is there incubation programs? Is there university centers? Are there co-working spaces for people to mix and mingle, meet other people, to receive trainings from experts? The fifth is about the access to market. So how is it, how is the logistics system? How is the value chain and the distribution channel? How easy is it to ship something from Dhaka to Sylhet in Bangladesh, from, Palembang to Phnom Penh in Cambodia, to Bali to Jakarta? So it's a bit, how easy is it to access the market? And the last is about innovation and technology. So how, easy is it to use new technologies? How easy is it to use digital tools to leverage it for your business? How is a, IP system in place? So I think for me, this framework, these 6 points really helped me understand that maybe, of course, I think government policy level side is important to make the entrepreneurship ecosystem mainstreamed and sustainable by do things that everyone has a role to play. Universities have a role to play. Role models have a role to play. The successful entrepreneurs who can give back, who can inspire the next generations. Families has a very important role to play, especially when it comes to young social entrepreneurs. So I think everyone has a role in an entrepreneurship ecosystem. And yeah, I hope this framework helps a bit to understand the big picture.
Thank you so much, Din Long. So it really does what you just shared. It really echoes what Susanna has said earlier as well, that you do need a comprehensive approach to tackling the social entrepreneurship ecosystem issue across countries and across regions. You mentioned that it needs to be easy to start a business. You need to take care of the human capital, training, access to finance, availability of support services, access to markets, as well as innovation and technology. So that's a lot of things to tackle in one go. And I'm sure the Y20 youth delegates here are getting a lot of ideas for the policy recommendations. So thank you so much. Half an hour flew by just without us realizing. Maybe if I could ask, before we close, if I could ask Susanna and Dinlong, if you have any message for our audience here. They are passionate young people excited to make a change, and they're about to influence policymaking at the Y20. If we are all for fostering youth social entrepreneurship, what do you wish to say to them as delegates who would be the voice of youth in the G20 summit?
Maybe I can start first. No, I think for me, it's great to do that. I think, yeah, I mean, my only, I guess, advice is the same advice that we share with young youth is, when you want to address SDG issue, is speak with the people who are affected by this issue. Whether it's yourself, whether it's your community, whether it's someone else, but it's the only way to really understand what the problem is about. So I guess if you are trying to work about, the policy support for young social entrepreneurs, yes, speak with as many young social entrepreneurs that you can to really understand. Sorry, I froze again.
Yeah.
Speak to as many young founders as you can to really understand, what challenges are they going through, how difficult it is in terms of training, family pressure, in terms of it's so difficult to be an entrepreneur, especially during COVID. So yeah, that will be my piece of advice.
Thank you. And sorry, Susanna, to interrupt, but we actually have a question coming from the audience. So perhaps I will take one of them. And sorry for the other one. Perhaps you can ask in the next session. So I will call on Jin Swen. Jin Swen, if you want to unmute themselves, please unmute yourself and address your question to the speaker. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I think it was very insightful and very helpful for all of us. I have a question for Ding Long regarding Youth Collab. And I wanted to ask if the partners of Youth Collab support youth entrepreneurs in developing their businesses in the long run. And if so, what kind of support is available for young entrepreneurs who want to scale up their businesses? Thank you.
Thank you, Jin Swan. Yeah, I think it's in two levels, I would say. So we have first, let's say we have the training at national level and then at regional level. And then at national level, basically the program is a bit different in every country, depending on the maturity of the ecosystem and the maturity of the social entrepreneurs that the UNDP country office is looking for. But for example, I think so if we visualize maybe the entrepreneurship journey again, if we start at maybe if we welcome youth who just have ideas, but haven't started anything yet. So the work and the training we or our partners will provide is really about, okay, now it's about understanding your problem. So it's about speaking with the communities who are affected. So we'll be providing the methodology, the guidance for the youth to do that. And then from that, how can they best, refine the solution? How can they prototype as quickly as possible to understand whether or not it can be something that can work? Maybe if we work with a bit more mature, still early stage social enterprises, but who are still, figuring out what is the best way to develop the product. So we might do, more traditional business training on marketing, on communication, on how to build a team, on how to build a product, on how to best reach your target customers and users, how to develop a product, and so on and so forth. But really always starting by, what do the entrepreneurs need? So that's more like the training part. And then on top of that, there's also other support systems, support service available. So for example, providing mentors to follow up and, observe and guide the entrepreneur in her or his journey. We also try to make connections between maybe investors with crowdfunding platforms. We have different trainings on e-commerce, on how to, so trying to bridge, the financing side as well, the funding side. So I guess the training is one layer. Second layer is all of these few things that also happen through the mentorship, through the connection, through the peer-to-peer learning with those entrepreneurs. And I hope it answers the question.
Thank you so much, Dinlong. And yes, we are closing. Perhaps Susanna, sorry, I interrupted earlier, but do you have any closing words for the delegates before we move on to the second session of the talk show?
Oh, thank you. No, I think a lot has been already said. Just connecting to this last point, I think it's very important to create a market of business development services so that there is sustainability in the approach, so that when our projects and sort of our time-bound interventions end, then there is a roster of experts that can continue providing support in the longer term to young entrepreneurs. I think thinking about how to integrate that in government programs or institutions or something that really gives sustainability to the effort is very important. And from my end, just to say it was a pleasure to see you, to hear your questions. I hope I'll be happy to respond more over the chat if you have more questions for me. Know that you have a voice and that your voice has a very important influence in the G20. So use it and continue looking into opportunities for to boost youth employment, and both in wage and self-employment. Not everybody is sufficiently skilled or interested in an entrepreneurship. So it's very important to open the spaces for dialogue and the transition of young people to decent work. That's all for me. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you so much, Susanna, Dinlong, for being with us today. I'm sure each and every one of us has learned so much from this conversation, and hopefully we'll take the insights forward in each of our respective fields and the policy negotiations. Thank you, and best wishes, and hope to see you again in our event soon. In the second session of today's talk show on youth social entrepreneurship, I am now pleased to welcome 4 amazing social entrepreneurs and practitioners in the social entrepreneurship ecosystem in Indonesia. For those who didn't have a chance to ask the question in the previous session, worry not, you will have plenty of opportunities to do so in this session. So in this session, we have representatives from the youth social entrepreneurs themselves, from the enablers, as well as someone from the financing side. So that should be a very diverse, interesting discussion for us. Let me briefly introduce our distinguished speakers. Romy Chayadi is a co-founder and CEO of Instellar, a purpose-driven company helping entrepreneurs to be more impactful, sustainable, and scalable. Instellar has supported over 170 impact enterprises through incubation, acceleration, and services in the past 5 years by working with corporate civil society organizations and international development organizations from South Korea, Singapore, and European countries. Gigi Septianto is the co-founder and CEO of WeCare.id, an Indonesian-based medical crowdfunding platform that enables underserved patients to secure funding for medical procedures. Through his work, Gigi has been awarded many recognitions, including Obama Foundation Leaders Asia Pacific 2019, Genti Asia Tatler, and Australia ASEAN Emerging Leaders in Social Enterprise. Arya Widianto is the Director and Chief Risk and Sustainability Officer of Amartha. Amartha is a financial technology startup that focuses its mission on providing affordable and flexible financial services for women and micro-entrepreneurs in rural areas. Arya is also appointed by the Indonesian government as the advocate for women empowerment at the G20. And last but not least, David Sokasing is the Managing Director of Angin, which is short for Angel Investment Network Indonesia. Angin is the most active investment network in Indonesia, which gathers a total of 120 investors. He's also the managing partner of Angin Women Fund, which pioneered the field of gender lens investing in the country. David was previously investment manager in charge of Indonesia for LGTVP, a global impact investor supporting organizations with social and environmental impact. And prior to that, David concentrated his work in the private equity industry before jumping into entrepreneurship. So welcome, Romy, Gigi, Arya, and David. We are very pleased to have you here with us today. And before we start taking questions from the audience, I would like to start by asking one question to each of the speakers. And I will start by asking first the youth social entrepreneurs who are with us today, Gigi and Arya. My first question is for Gigi. Gigi, I've heard so much about WeCare.id, and personally, I think WeCare.id is doing amazing, amazing things for people in dire need of access to healthcare services in Indonesia. Could you share with us what sparked the idea for the social enterprise, and why did you choose to pursue this particular social impact?
All right. Thank you, Joanna. Shall I share my screen? Yeah. Okay. So is my slides showing? Good. Okay. So yeah, the ideas and the spark of starting WeCare.id, I think, started long time ago when I was in a teenager time. So I was coming from a small village in Central Java. My mom was like a hospital worker, also my dad. And during, I think when I was like 10 or 15 years old, they got a bit creative. So they actually started a small clinic in my village, in our village. And it was like the only clinics in the village. So this is not the actual clinics, it's just like the illustrations. The vibe is quite similar. But one thing that was very unique is that one of the patient's room was actually just beside my bedroom. So every single night, I kind of exposed to like a lot of sufferings, a lot of people who kind of need medical care timely. Some of them are made it, some of them didn't make it. So I kind of aware during that time how important it is, how critical it is to actually to receive a timely and a sufficient healthcare services just in time. So it will, and then I look back as well, just like last week, perhaps for examples, this actually still happening. When I travel, for example, to like eastern part of Indonesia, there are a lot of kind of pregnant moms who there are a lot of gaps in terms of healthcare facilities in the rural areas, and also in the areas that it's very difficult to access. So another stories that also sparked the idea is that is there anyone here came from Philippines? So when I had traveling in Philippines, I kind of got into the public transportations, which is like the jeepney. So when I got there, there was like a man who also got into the jeepney, and then he kind of like pull out a sheet of paper, and then he talked in Tagalog. But then I kind of didn't understand because like it was Tagalog. But then when I look closer, it's actually medical record. So after the man showed the medical record, the people in the jeepney will start to give the money. So it's like when he kind of provide the transparency, people will trust it, and other people will help the man to afford his medical care or his child medical care. So that's the experience in an individual level. Then taking it at scale, we saw that there are a lot of gaps in terms of medical expertise and also infrastructures in Indonesia. So basically, you see these islands in Indonesia. In the red part, whenever you got sick in those islands, it will be very expensive for you to get the sufficient healthcare, because you will need to be transported to like better hospitals in the bigger cities like Jakarta or Bali or Bandung, for example. So there are a lot of this a gap in terms of the healthcare infrastructures. And a part of that, 30 to 40% of medical expenses are still out of pocket. So a part of the national insurance, you still have many times you still have to pay a lot of money in order to access sufficient healthcare services. And that's from the problem side. But what about the kind of people who give the money, like the people who are people who are like the people on the bus who give the man money, for example? So we also see a big potentials in here, because like Indonesia, as perhaps some of you might haven't know, but actually we were like recognized as a #1 generous country in the world. So like people really like to help each others. We love to giving other people's, and we like to offer help. And then there are a lot of cultures as well that enables this behaviors as well. For example, like alms giving cultures, annual zakat or something. Oh, I'm sorry, my bandwidth is low. But I hope hear my voice. Perhaps if anyone can. All right.
We can hear you, Gigi.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I will continue. I'll be short. And then so yeah, there's a lot of potential in terms of philanthropic potentials that can still be unlocked. And so far, the alms giving culture as well, the potential is still just like, we only captured like just few percent of it, and there are a lot of still big portions of it that can be unlocked through the digital ecosystem. And that's also met with the needs of the medical financing gap that's still happening in Indonesia, especially for the chronic disease, like I mentioned before. So that's where we are kind of convinced that the ideas and the approach of having a crowdfunding platform, something that will be a safety net for the people outside of the existing systems like national insurance or commercial insurance, this kind of philanthropical approach can still work. So we kind of just starting it, and then the ideas are quite straightforward. So basically, we connect hospitals, patients to our sites. We help them to curate the stories, to post the photos, to tell how much actually they need, and then at the other side, people will donate as little as like $1 or even less than that. So it's kind of straightforward. You can choose which patient that you kind of wants to help, and then you can start forwardly helping the people. A part of this, we also have other services, which is like also help in the corporates to distribute donations to our communities and also beneficiaries, and also create a relevant program that will support the crowdfunding itself. So yeah, and the future in the future, I believe the potential is still very big. We hope we can build this kind of community that everyone can care and offer help to each others. And again, we want to unlock the potentials of this new funds source, which is like from philanthropical sources, to a innovative approach in order to be one of the solutions in terms of financing healthcare.
Thank you, Gigi. That was a wonderful presentation. Really interesting to hear about the journey for you. It's based on a personal story, and then where you are today with WeCare.id. My next question is for Arya. Arya, peer-to-peer lending, which is what Amartha is doing, has become one of the hottest industries in financial technology. It's growing globally at a very fast rate, as it allows businesses and individuals to lend money to others directly without a financial institution as an intermediary. But if I'm not mistaken, there are currently more than 100 fintech P2P lending platforms in Indonesia alone. Can you share with us how Amartha is different from other fintech lending platforms?
Right. Thank you, Joanna, for having me here. Good evening, everyone. Yes, you're right that Indonesia has more than 150 financial technology companies, and Amartha is one of them. And established in 2010, Amartha now has disbursed its micro and SMEs loan to over more than 1 million customers who are all female and own ultra micro and micro businesses across Indonesia. So in fact, we are operating in more than 35,000 villages in Indonesia. And the way we are different with other companies or fintech peer-to-peer lending is that our focus on providing micro loan to women-only customers, especially those operating as a micro and ultra micro business entrepreneurs. And in particular, during the pandemic, we play our role as the source of financial services for them when banks are unable to provide loans because of the pandemic and also because of the increasing risk due to the economic condition. So last year in 2021, we conducted a survey to our customers, especially in rural villages, and we discovered that more than 74% of ultra micro and micro businesses are the one who are most severely impacted by the pandemic, and it shows that how fragile this segment is, while eventually they are the core, the one who sustains the national economy, as 99% of jobs are created from this segment in the micro and ultra micro segment. So in this sense, financial services like Amartha, using technology to reach out to remote areas, are the one that becomes the hopes of these grassroots levels. As we also conducted another research and discovered quite surprising facts that when we asked, what do you need to help you recover from the pandemic? And the number one answer was working capital loan on top of the other needs that they require from other supporters. Even it's higher than the cash transfer or the cash allowance from the government. So it really encouraging for us to see that the level of resilience on these segments are quite high, and all they need is the access to finance. And it has an implications to the policy making that in the future we need to design a more robust and streamlined access to finance, especially for women, because currently even though they contributes significantly to the national economy, but in terms of financial access, women, especially in rural villages, are the one who are left behind and who are not served by the formal financial institutions. So non-bank financial institutions like financial technology, who are not required to comply with banking stringent banking regulations, are one of the hopes for this segment, where we can provide more affordable and more flexible financial schemes and access for them, so that eventually it will help them recover from the economy, especially post the pandemic. And when we are talking about access to finance, we should not limit ourselves towards the financial inclusion per se, but we need to see it as a bigger tools to improve the well-being and capabilities of the women itself. So in this chart, we can see that starting from working capital, savings, digital payments, and access to finance in general for women, it has a huge implications for their improvement of capabilities and eventually their well-being in the family. So we could say that starting from access to finance, we can see more prosperous generations and families in Indonesia. And this is a more specific stories from Amartha's customers. We conducted another research that 1 year after joining Amartha, more than 94% of our customers experienced that their living conditions improves, as indicated by the improvement of income and also their business improvement. So they have better access to market, and eventually their well-being metrics are improved as well. And through our hybrid approach, where we also deploy a field officers to the ground to provide trainings, it will also help our customers to improve their networks. So it will open up more markets for them, and also they could generate a peer learning among the groups themselves, which eventually help them grow together as a community. So this approach is considered like the uniqueness of Amartha, and it makes Amartha different from any other 150 or so fintechs in Indonesia. Back to you, Joanna.
Thank you so much for the explanation. Arya. It's very interesting to see that it's not just a peer-to-peer lending, but it actually has a very clear social impact. And Amartha also fills in the gap for access to finance for women in Indonesia. Excellent. So my next question, we'll move on to the enablers. So Romy, your company Instellar, it offers incubation, acceleration, and advisory services to social enterprises. As one of the key players in the youth social entrepreneurship landscape in the country, how do you see the role of Instellar and other similar institutions such as yourselves in enabling and supporting young social entrepreneurs?
Yes, thank you, Joanna, for the questions. Hi, everyone. Really great to be here. I think the role of enablers or intermediaries such as Instellar is very important in the ecosystem in Indonesia. First of all, I would like to note here that Instellar is not the only players in the space. There are also other organizations, companies who are providing business development service or incubation or acceleration programs. In terms of our own activities, we always see ourselves in terms of three roles: as a catalyst, as a consultant, as a connector. To highlight this role, I would like to share one program which we ran last year actually, which is Foodpreneur Generation. This is a youth social entrepreneurship program which we ran in collaboration with Y20, a non-profit organization operating in Indonesia. And in this program, we deliver a program named Seed, which is a program to help early stage entrepreneurs, especially those who are running eco-inclusive businesses. And in this program, we are focusing on those who already have ideas, but they are not yet running the business. So it's at the ideation level. And the program would focus on an early workshop, asking the entrepreneurs or the aspiring entrepreneurs to sharpen their ideas, and then help them with some tools which they can use to validate their ideas. We let the entrepreneurs work on this validation for quite some time, 1 to 2 months. And then afterward, we will go back again, working with them to see the result of this testing or validation process. This is one of the programs we run, but I think in general, this is how we work with social entrepreneurs, and especially young social entrepreneurs. I think the role of an enabler or enablers in the space cannot be understated, especially because I think overall our ecosystem is young and nascent. We have a thriving millennials and Gen Z, and many of them are thinking or already doing businesses, and especially social enterprises. But I think if we look at, for example, what we have done in Indonesia compared to other countries, I think we still have a lot to learn. And this is where I think we can help each other in the context of G20 or Y20, learning from each other, from other ecosystems, from other players, how we can better support young social entrepreneurs in our own respective countries. Back to you, Joanna.
Thank you so much, Romy, for the explanation. It's really interesting to see Instellar offering all sorts of a helping hand for prospective social entrepreneurs, especially youth social entrepreneurs in this country. And as you said, the role of enabler should not be understated, because they do incubate the social enterprises and help them be reach where they want to be. And yeah, my last question will be for David. So David, Angin is very well known in the social entrepreneurship space in Indonesia, just as well known as the other people we have here today. And whenever we talk about social enterprise and we talk about financing, Angin is always comes up in the conversation. From our research for the Y20 white paper on youth employment, we found that access to financing is one of the greatest challenges faced by young social entrepreneurs. Can you share with us how Angin bridges the expectations of investors with the youth social entrepreneurs that you have worked with?
Perfect. Can you hear me well? Okay, I hope so. I'm using my hotspot, so I hope it's going to be okay. So yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm sharing a couple of slides. Yeah, so I mean, first, to answer your questions, I think I'm going to just quickly talk about Onion. And as you mentioned, we are quite well known for the left side of this slide, which is the investment services. I wouldn't get too much details about the advisory business, which is very similar, I think, to what Instella is offering and doing in Indo. So I will not cover this too much, but I will focus on actually this investment platform we call Onion. So what we do basically, we play a bridge between investors and entrepreneurs. Everybody thinks that the only issue is usually on the entrepreneur side. They have difficulty to access funding. They don't know who to talk to, etc. But actually, this is true for sure. But there's also a huge issue on the investor side who also have a lot of difficulties to invest. It's not because you have your capital available that deploying this capital is actually an easy journey. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to finding the entrepreneurs, understanding what to look for, doing due diligence, etc. So Anil is basically in between the investors and entrepreneurs, and we solve a couple of gaps that investors and entrepreneurs are facing. So the question was actually, how do we bridge expectation of investors to entrepreneurs? As I mentioned, we have to work on both sides. We have to work on the expectation of investors, and we have to work actually on the entrepreneur themselves. So the first thing we do actually to align expectation and bridge investors and entrepreneurs, first is actually to create a pool of investors who could actually invest in these young entrepreneurs or even social entrepreneurs. And this type of investors are usually individual investors. So people like you and me with a lot more money who are willing to deploy this money in startups that could be technology enabled or non-technology enabled, it doesn't matter, but they actually commit to support and invest in these entrepreneurs. And this pool of investors for a long time was not necessarily available in the countries. It's very scattered, and these investors, whatever they have actually liquidity to deploy, they also have a lot of difficulties to deploy because they lack of confidence, they lack of knowledge, they lack of legal experience, etc. So we work a lot on the investor side to actually align expectation of what is going on in the market, what type of quality of entrepreneurs we can find, what type of valuation they can expect. So a lot of work is actually to bridge on the investor side to the entrepreneurs. But the truth is, honestly, sometimes we don't want to align expectation of investor to the entrepreneurs. Is the other way around. We try actually to level up the level of entrepreneurs so they meet the expectation of investors. Because as much as we want to bridge and told the investor, look, you should probably invest, look at it that way, etc. At the end of the day, a lot of work needs still to be done on the entrepreneurs, especially young ones, especially social entrepreneurs who have a lot of challenges finding capital, and that's why actually we play also a role. Some of the challenges will be simply that, especially social entrepreneurs, I would probably mention one is sometimes they really have difficulties to articulate the nature of being a social entrepreneur. So they pitch in a way that the business sounds more like an NGO, a non-profit organization, rather than actually a company that I would invest in, or we can actually create a return alongside the investment investment side. So we end up having entrepreneurs who spend 5 minutes pitching only about the impact they create, but forget the essential of the pitch, which is themselves, the market size, the quality of the execution, the ability to do it at scale, etc. So this is where actually most of the work, probably 70%, is more on this aspect of helping entrepreneurs to increase their readiness to face the expectation of investors. Back to you. I was trying to go below 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you so much, David. Excellent presentation. It's really interesting to see how Angin works on a two-prong approach. One side, you're helping the investors to find the entrepreneurs and to do due diligence and all the other things required in order for them to invest. But you also help with leveling up the entrepreneurs so that they meet the expectations of the investors. Excellent. That is very, very fascinating. So thank you so much for our 4 speakers for the introduction. Each of them is doing amazing work in building the youth social entrepreneurship ecosystem in Indonesia. And now we will take questions from the audience. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question for the speakers. Like before, when called, please state your name, your country, the speaker, who you are directing your question to, and your question. First, I will call on user Alotavi. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Yusur, and I am from Saudi Arabia. Good afternoon from sunny Jeddah here in Saudi Arabia. My question is about resilience when it comes to youth entrepreneurship, and it's open to any of our guests. I would like to thank our guests for the type of work they do to support young entrepreneurs, whether that's financial support or operational support. My question is, where do they see the role of both private sector or civil society organizations in supporting young entrepreneurs, not only standing on their feet, but also being resilient?
And user, you're addressing your question to?
My question is open to any of our guests, because I guess this is a very broad question. I would like to hear it from any of them. It's going to be beneficial.
Sure. Perhaps we can start with Romy. Do you have any thoughts on that, Romy?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Joanna. Hi, user. I think the entrepreneurs are at different stage of their journeys, right? When they are first starting, the needs are different when they are in the when they are post revenue, when they are fundraising, and so on. So in terms of resilience, if we are talking about our friends, our fellow entrepreneurs who are just starting their journey, a lot would be needed in terms of giving them confidence, giving them I would say free money even to start their journey. And this is where if we are looking at, for example, corporate and a civil society organization, they can do programs which provide seed capital or grants in terms of so the entrepreneurs can start their journey. And in this process, I think what important is to realize that during this first phase, it's a very natural to see that people need to try a few times before they succeed. And this is where we can come with confidence. And this is where people build resilience, actually. I believe that entrepreneurs, no matter where they are in this part of this planet, they build their resilience over time. We cannot expect them to have one idea and succeed without trying. And so this is needed. However, when they pass this stage and they are building the revenue and so on, different support, different assistance are needed. For example, if we are talking with corporate, another avenue to help with the resilience is to say openly, this is the market standard, for example. If they are opening up their procurement process, for example, for social enterprises or for any companies run or led by young entrepreneurs, they can say, hey, this is the market standard. You have to fulfill this, otherwise we cannot do business with you. I don't think people should be given easier target. I think people should be made to realize that there is a high standard to be achieved. And I think this is applicable for anyone. Actually, by doing this, actually, we help the entrepreneurs to build their resilience. And if they continue in this journey, they pass on the next stage, for example, when they are fundraising, they probably would meet with Angin, with David, for example. I totally agree with David. We should hold the bar still as hard as need be. We should say, hey, this is real money. Now it's not free money, it's not cheap money, it's real money now. So this is the bar. And I think this is how we help them. Parallel with that, we should also maintain our confidence. I think resilience is maintained by having high standard, but at the same time giving the entrepreneurs confidence that, hey guys, you can fail now, but it's okay. Keep doing what you are doing. We are here to help you. I think this is how we support them. And if we are civil society organization, we can help them by having programs providing this kind of support. If we are corporate, we can keep having conversations with them. Like I mentioned, holding the standard as high as need be, but be with them. Keep the open channel, keep the conversation going. That we are always ready to work with them once they are ready. What many people forget is that this is a journey. Nobody builds a great company in one day, in one night, and so we have to be there along of this journey. That would be from me, Joanna, and you, sir.
Thank you so much, Romy. That's very interesting. Like you said, it's entrepreneurship is a journey. It's not just a one-time thing where you instill confidence. We actually when they're leveling up, you also have to kind of keep them accountable to certain standards. So now I would like to move on to Said. Said, the floor is yours if you want to ask the speakers or one of them a question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having this amazing opportunity to share knowledge. It's been really insightful. My question is to Arya from Amartha. Regarding rural areas, we have a great concern and a dire need for social enterprises there. But with expansion, there comes, immigration from the rural areas to big cities. How can you ensure the sustainability of having social enterprises providing to these social communities in the rural areas? Like, what does Amartha do when they go to, target such a rural area in the country? Do you study the rural area, the needs, and how can you ensure the sustainability of the social enterprise that you fund over there? That's my question. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Syed, for the questions. Yes, Amartha is focusing our operations in rural areas by providing working capital, especially to women who owns small businesses, or we call it ultra, micro, and micro enterprises. And why we are targeting women? Because in Indonesia and also in other developing countries, women are the more fragile segment, where they're prone to urbanizations, especially if there are not enough jobs in the villages. They will move to big cities, and it creates another problems related to migrant workers, protections of women rights, etc. So what Amartha is doing is, in addition to providing working capital, we also train them with basic skills on how to manage their money and also how to manage their businesses. That's why on my earlier slides, I capture a group meeting where our field officers were training the women customers as part of Amartha's members. So on weekly basis, we group them in a small groups of 10 or 15 people, and we do have certain curriculums that needs to be shared with our customers, especially on how to build businesses, or on how to manage their money, scale up their businesses, so that they will have a better sustainability, meaning that they could generate incomes while still, as a women, they can do they can perform other tasks in the household. For example, taking care of their children, doing some domestic works, etc. While at the same time, they also empower themselves by having independent income apart from the husbands. And this strategy, from our experience, is proven effective. First, to create jobs in the villages, because based on our survey, last year alone, there are more than 87,000 jobs created from our ecosystems, meaning that the one women that we empower, once their business grow, she will hire another employee to help growing the business or support the businesses. And typically, these women will hire another women, so it created another jobs for the women in the villages. So it has multiple effects on the villages ecosystems itself, and it creates a bigger GDP for the villages. So it reduces also the gap, the income gap between the villages and the urban areas or the cities. So these are the side effects of financial access to women, and that's why I always encourage everybody, if we are talking about a credit or access to finance for women, we should not see it as only a credit or microloans per se, but we need to see it as a bigger picture of women empowerment and economic development of the nations at large. Hope it answers your question, Said.
Thank you so much, Arya. That's fantastic. So you mentioned group meetings with the beneficiaries as well, and it sounds like it needed a very hands-on approach in order to get the enterprise up and running and making sure that the funds are channeled well. So thank you for your answer. The next question will be from John from USA. John, if you want to unmute yourself and address the speakers directly, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Hello. So my question is just a general panel, just sort of curious in your work, what regulatory barriers or obstacles have frustrated aspiring business owners when they're trying to grow their shop?
Would you like to address one of the speakers, John, or is this an open question?
Yeah, I know, Romy, you it looks like your organization does a lot of work with this.
Sure, John, but if you don't mind, I would like also to offer David to respond, David. You also know a lot of this, but from my side, so there's been an improvement in Indonesia in terms of how people can start business. It used to be very, very difficult. It takes months to just set up a proper legal entity. Now it's improving. Other than that, I think on the investment side, there is still some regulatory work that we need to do actually in terms of the government support, especially if we are looking as entrepreneurs looking to fundraise from abroad. But I think David, maybe you want to add on this. I think you are much more experienced in this.
Yeah, and I can answer as well because I used to have a startup back in Paris, right? And I mean, to be honest, you know, the regulation here could be quite tricky in later stage when you start dealing with licensing, employment, a lot of tax, etc. What I see is more or less at that stage when you start to scale, it's really become a nightmare for entrepreneurs. To start a business in Indonesia, look, I see a lot of entrepreneurs, they are not registered. They still do some certain activity without licensing, right? So it's like easier to ask for. You can actually start something without so much, you know, like legal burden actually. So compared to France, for instance, I found it easier because we can operate in the gray area for quite some times. And this is really so it really creates this opportunity for people to start without thinking too much. I would say regulation really becomes also an issue if you touch some very strategic market, like usually, for instance, everything which linked to money and people, retail. So typically, this is where it might be more difficult if you start to touch food as well. You know, you have a couple of regulation, and this could become difficult. But compared to the US, I found it easier here. The main difficulty, I would say, for social entrepreneurs is there is no distinction if you are a non-profit, a for-profit, or social entrepreneur. So you do good, you create an impact as a for-profit organizations, but you don't have any tax holiday or you don't have any advantage. The government doesn't recognize yet as a legal statute what is social entrepreneurship. So basically, you are either for-profit or non-profit, which creates a lot of challenges when you're in between. So you don't get rewarded so much from the government if you're a social entrepreneur, except some grant and so on. But from a regulation, you operate as a for-profit. Yeah, back to you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Romy. So there's quite a few barriers there, yeah. But I think one of the things that you highlighted was that from David, that it's quite easy to do business in Indonesia. You just kind of operate a gray area, but at the same time, having no legal definition for social enterprises can become an issue as well for the social entrepreneurs themselves. And that is also one of the things that was highlighted in the Y20 white paper on youth employment. Do we have any other questions from the audience, perhaps? While we wait for the audience, for the delegates to ask a question, perhaps I can ask a question to Gigi, and perhaps Arya can add as well. So during our research for the Y20 white paper, youth social entrepreneurs have said that there are tensions between making their social enterprise a profitable and sustainable business versus staying true to their social mission. So there's a fine balance between profitability versus staying true to the original mission of the social enterprise. I wanted to ask, did you face the same challenges? And if you did, how do you balance between business and social mission in Amartha and WeCare ID? Perhaps I can ask Gigi to answer first on behalf of WeCare ID.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. I think that's the dilemma that everyone will face when trying to balance the intentions to create impact and also to create profit. For us, it's always back to the founders or and other shareholders. Even the definition of social enterprise itself.
Gigi, I think your internet. Perhaps we can ask Arya to answer first, then while we wait for Gigi to recover his internet.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Jana. Yeah, I think the question between, oh, he's back. Okay, I'll continue. Yes, the question about impact versus profitability should not be seen as a zero-sum game where we need to choose either one. So we can do both, and we prove that it works because since the very beginning of Amartha's establishment back in 2010, even though back then we didn't know how to do it, but we already have a vision that Amartha is a scalable company, and that's why we envision to deploy more technology to make our process more efficient. We reach out to more people, and therefore our scalability from the point of view of business can be justified. While on the other hand, the founders and also the early team understand that even though Amartha is scaled at some points in the future, but we remain loyal to our ultimate goals, which identifies and differs Amartha from any other company, which is focused to develop rural economy through empowering women and also by providing financial access for them. So by having those two things in mind, scalability as a business model, and also the root cause why we are here, the visions of the company, I think we can do both. It's more like having one leg stays on the ground and then one leg is freely pivoting, adopting new technologies, new features, adding new business models, new products, and being adaptive to the environment. But while the other foot is stick to the ground with our missions since the very beginning.
Thank you, Arya. So it is possible to do both, not just to pursue, sustainability, scalability as a business model, but also for addressing the root cause. Oh, Gigi, you're back. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, hopefully
Sorry,
it's not
got cut off earlier.
Yeah, but because yeah, just like it's a short additions. Perhaps for us, I think it's always important for us to always have impact measurement, so that at least wherever we grow forward, we kind of still justify that we're doing the impact that we are intend to do. And also like legally, we also kind of now have both legal entity running together. For example, we have a yayasan as a non-profit entity and also for-profit entity. So hopefully, by having this both sides, we can keep us in balance in terms of pursuing the social impact that we are intend to do since the beginning. Yep.
Thank you, Gigi. So impact measurement is very important. It was also brought up by several of our interviewees in the white paper when we developed our white paper, and also just using a for-profit and non-profit business organization entities for your startup, for your social enterprise has been helpful. So we have 2 minutes, and as we close, perhaps I can close with a question, and please answer this very briefly because I've been told we can't go over time. In what way should organizations such as yourselves be more involved in policy discussions on youth social entrepreneurship, especially given that the entrepreneurship, the ecosystem in Indonesia or around the world, in countries around the world, is still very nascent? What advice would you give to the governments in the G20 to support this? Perhaps we can start from David, Romy, Gigi, and Arya, and then we can close.
So your question was what can we do? I think for us, I don't know if it was the questions, but it's data, right? I think we work with the government quite a lot to give them data, basically show them, okay, how many investors we identify, what type of ticket size, what are the key issues when it comes to fundraising, but really focusing on data. That's usually what we can do. And I think, look, entrepreneurship could be basically that's what I would say. Entrepreneurship sometimes it's risky, and if you don't have basically a certain financial cushion or a certain family backup, then it's actually very difficult. So I would say try to create program and incentive for people who don't have necessarily the financial support to start a business. So being basically not financially advantaged doesn't become basically a bottleneck for entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurship is not, especially startup, is not only a rich people sort of hobby in a way that sometimes we see happening.
Thank you, David. What about Romy? Perhaps do you have any maybe brief comments on this? How can Instell our work be more involved in policy discussions with the government?
Yes, we've been actually involved with some of the ministry, in particular with Bappenas, the Ministry of National Development Planning. And in this particular work, we work to propose policy on sustainable procurement, actually. We hope that by working with this ministry, the procurement policy of the government can focus more or give some preference to eco-inclusive businesses in the country. I think other ministries in Indonesia have been quite proactive in this area. I can mention, for example, Ministry of the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise and Co-op, as well as the Ministry of Coordinating Economy. So I think in this area, there's been some development in terms of the government efforts to reach out to many of the players, and I think we are ready to have more discussion with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Romy. And very briefly, Arya and Gigi, before we close.
Perhaps a message from government: be open-minded and be soft with us, because as we're working in a quite sensitive area, which is like in healthcare and also fintech, for example, there are a lot of policy and regulations, especially in the national insurance space, that is still not yet ready to be disrupted by some of the innovations that perhaps came from our space, something like that. So if that happens, hopefully we can have like a more open-minded talk, and then we can start really find ways how the innovation still can flowering, and also it can be regulated as well by the government.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gigi. And Arya, our last speaker for today. What are your thoughts on this?
Right. Yeah, I think we need to continue the dialogue with the government to set better or more fair playing fields to avoid redundancy. As you know, in the area of social entrepreneurship, especially in fintech and also in the areas of women empowerment, there are many areas where actually it can be perform, the problem can be solved by the private sectors, but in that area we see government step in and even create unnecessary competition. So we need to set a fair playing fields between private sectors and government sectors so that we can fill the gap and eventually provide better collaborations between public and private to solve our problems.
Thank you so much, Arya. Thank you so much to our 4 fantastic speakers for sharing their time with us today. I believe that all of us here today are walking away with more knowledge, more insights about the youth social entrepreneurship ecosystem. And yeah, with appropriate support, youth social entrepreneurship really does have the potential to address a lot of social challenges, contribute to job creation and economic growth, drive positive change, and promote a more inclusive society. And it is our hope that the Y20 Summit will be the place where youth delegates can voice their opinion and give policy recommendations that will improve the ecosystem and drive more young people to become social entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's an honor to have all of you here. And yeah, good luck with everything, best wishes, and hope to see you again in our event very soon. Thank you. Over to Sugit for the next event. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. A very warm welcome to the first opening statement session at the Y20 Indonesia